to freelancers in Australia, which is quite interesting. But writing stuff, and then when that was written and it went up to the designers, they'd put it on the page, and then they'd print the page out, and then they'd pass that around to different people to sub and to proof. And quite often you would get the page that you had written to sub and to proof, which I think is a big mistake, because I think you always need a fresh pair of eyes to look at a page, because chances are you'll always spot mistakes, and so some mistakes do look awful, really, and a lot of people do spot mistakes, and I think it can undermine the reputation of a publication and the credibility. But I don't think this was a one-off either. I think a lot of places now are sharing the sub-in and the proof-in amongst people.
Yeah, I mean, in one sense, I mean, it's always been the case that sports desks and features desks and sometimes business desks have tended to muck in and employ writer subs, and in fact that's quite an enjoyable mixture of the two, because it does mean that you can sort of divide, rather than being wholly production journalism, you do get a chance to write, and vice versa. If you're interested in design and headline writing, you get a chance to do that without just doing it all the time. But the sort of Nick's right. I think where they've experimented in trying to more or less do away with subs altogether and reporters writing their own, and a few papers have tried to get the reporters write the headlines and so on. These things tend to work in cycles. I mean, frankly, it's my humble opinion that it just doesn't work, or it doesn't work well enough. And Nick's line earlier about the last line of defence is that it's absolutely vital from a legal point of view that somebody is taking responsibility for pages. It's very hard to spot your own errors, and I think we tend to have a pattern in newspapers that they'll cut back and cut back and cut back until somebody makes a legal mistake and they get sued for libel or prosecuted for contempt or something, and then the bosses will say, no, we need to employ more people again. So I don't know if Nick would agree, but there is a sort of cycle in papers every couple of years. You end up re-employing or going back to basics and saying, we need to improve the quality because that's what people want, the customers, and we can't afford to be sued every 5 minutes for getting things wrong. Yeah.
But I think thankfully most newspapers anyway, still operate that traditional structure of having a team of sub-editors. But it is true that the last newspaper I worked on, they did encourage reporters to come up with headlines, and I think reporters some of them anyway, quite enjoyed the challenge of writing a headline. But I think if they were under pressure to get a story out, I think the last thing they wanted was to have that extra burden of coming up with a snappy headline. So yes and no, really. But it's good to see that there are subs still exist on newspapers. I mean, newspaper offices are being hit at the moment and being restructured and so on. But as Andrew said, from a legal point of view, I think you need to have a team of sub-editors to spot any of these mistakes, which do happen, absolutely. And you could have an expensive kind of legal action on your hands if you're not eagle-eyed enough to weed out those errors.
I noticed that extends to the story in Metro this week of relating to blogs, and although it's early days still in terms of internet sort of libel cases, we have had, I think, in the last 12 months more examples of the first sort of Facebook libel and a number of cases where individuals have been seeking internet service providers or whoever's publishing a certain site to divulge the name of contributors that they believe are libeling them. So I think it's one area that responsible publishers are just going to have to become more concerned about. But as we've said in the chat earlier, it is a cyclical thing. I think there's a lot of very shoddy sort of online sort of journalism as well at the moment, where people are not perhaps editing as tightly as they should be, and that tends to happen until something goes wrong, and then people tighten things up. So sometimes it takes a few cases to go through the courts before you actually sort of get a change in the management outlook on these things.
Yeah, I would certainly echo that about blogs. A lot of people think they're the future of journalism, but a lot of it is pretty irresponsible, based on speculation, conspiracy theories, and whatever people think of journalists. Most journalists, and in fact the overwhelming majority, are responsible, do check their facts, and they've got a team around them as well to double check those facts, i.e. the sub-editors, which bloggers don't have, of course. There's no substitute for good writing.
Yes, and I noticed Rummer's point, the other thing, of course, that we're conscious of in distance learning especially, is that obviously the law is very different in different countries in the world, in the way that it's applied, and I think sometimes it's sort of hard for us, obviously, to dovetail any general points about the law to every country. We've had a number of sort of cases recently where in different countries journalists have a much tougher time than we do here. So even on something like libel, although most countries have a similar sort of basic principles relating to libel, there are obviously a number of countries in Africa, for example, where what you can publish in the local papers could very easily land you in jail, or being sued. And I think that's, as Nick says, the legal side of things, wherever you are in the world, is a really important sort of principle. If you're going to be involved in writing or publishing, you need to know where you stand. So that's why there's a media law aspect to all the distance learning courses, even if it's just a basic introduction. And it's why those people like Jojo that are doing the attendance course do it in more detail, especially if you were joining a paper where you would, like Nick, and I, both been sort of court reporters at one stage or another. So if you're going to be covering court cases, you obviously need to know the law in a lot of detail. I'm just also wondering, Nick, I'm trying to answer Shaz's question here which is about a specific assignment, and I don't know if you've dealt with, if it rings any bells for you. That
it looks like
necessarily answer it in the main room, but
yeah. Well, it looks like the first assignment to me, with the pen portrait and the character study of a newspaper. I mean, what I say to students about the first assignment is that all we're looking for is that you can write, that you have a certain level of English, and that you can write, and really the pen portrait is a chance for you to express yourself a little bit more. I'm not too worried about the accuracy of it. I'm more worried about whether you can express yourself, and that the standard of English is sufficiently high enough to tackle the rest of the course. So I wouldn't get too hung up about the overlap between the two. Yes, there may be a little bit of overlap, but I would never mark anybody down because of that.